Factor
Do
roping?
it live. Boom, boom, shakalaka.
Oh, too many channels.
Not
Do
roping.
I need the? I
Not
don't need
roping.
the roping. Instagram. What?
Sir.
I don't think I need that one.
Probably what it's doing. Yep. Yeah, that's the one. Well, anybody that's coming in, welcome in. Sorry for being sicker than a dog last week. A nice gift from 4-year-old girls at home. Petri dishes.
Petri dishes.
Petri dishes. God, that was kind of good right there, Jay.
That was swanky.
That was like, I hit it nice, you know? Like how you're supposed to hit it, like nice. God, that was kind of good. Yeah, that was good too. I can watch it back, have fun. Like,
so bear with us when we try to answer all
geez,
of them.
I will try my best to answer as many as I possibly can. No doubt about that. But like, let's go ahead and start throwing some of these questions out so I can answer as many as I possibly can today.
All right. Let's start with a little basic one.
A basic, nice.
This comes.
Is this a slow pitch softball one right here?
This is a slow pitch softball one.
Get me warmed
no
up.
95 mile an hour right out the gate.
All right, let's go.
All right, Anthony and Gotti. How do you know if you are too close or too far away from the ball when using irons compared to driver?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So let's actually go about this from this standpoint. We'll go the extreme. So I got my 60 degree, and then I'll have driver here as well. So a lot of this is like when we're set up in posture, always looking for players to get more like on the balls of their feet, definitely toe bias in their setup. And the reason for that is just in movement. As I'm turning, I'm always looking to work away from the golf ball, whether it's spiral tissue and I'm turning away either side, or if I'm dropping, you'll notice I'm always working away from here. So like Keegan Bradley is like the only homie that I've ever seen that can start like heel loaded and then stay in here beautifully. Most players, if they're heel loaded, what they'll tend to do is they'll start to work and encroach onto the golf ball through the hip, which we definitely don't want. We want the ability to take this golf club and shoot the center of mass of the club head, the bad end of the golf club, out and down, out and down. So if I'm sending it here, I need to be countering that away from the golf ball through spiral tissue or through appropriate dropping. Okay, now, where I'm heading with this is based on the shape of the club. So obviously 2 very different looks in club design. We have this like really long shaft and we have this really short shaft. For a longer shaft, I'm still pitched over onto the balls of my feet, toe bias, a little bit of knee flex here, and the arms hang always on top of my chest. Now, when I get these arms up on top of my chest, the look is that my arms are extended out away from me, but it's just because they're sitting on top of the chest. So the difference in the pitch, like flexion state in the hips, is going to dictate really where those arms are in space, like the look of them, especially from down the line. So if I'm set up to a driver here, okay, and I look in here, so I'm still balls on my feet, arms are on top of the chest, and the golf club hangs down. You'll notice, or sits to the ground, you'll notice from the shoulder sockets, looking straight down, the hands are extended away from where the middle of my shoulder is if we just drew a line straight down from here, away from me. Now, if you look at Tiger hitting a wedge, it looks like his arms are like almost underneath him, and that's because if I have my arms on top of my chest and I just bend until I finally get that golf club to the ground, look how much more pitch there is here in my trunk working down towards the ground because of the shape of the golf club. And the shorter the club gets, the more that looks like it sits underneath me, but my arms are still on top of my chest here. So notice how it looks like they're almost like inside my shoulder sockets here compared to where driver was, as the arms are away. Now, those are like the 2 extremes, driver to wedge. Irons, typically what we're going to see in general, doesn't have to be perfect, but if you drew a line straight down from the shoulder socket right into the instep or the butt end of the club, that's where the butt end of the club would be. So the instep of the hand would be right there. Too close, too far. Okay, hopefully that makes sense, but it's all based on the trunk's shape, based on the club's shape. The shorter the club is, the more that I pitch over. Okay, the longer the club is, the more that I'm standing taller here. But in both of those scenarios, the arms are up on top of my chest. And that's the structure that we want to keep. Hopefully that makes sense.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. One for one.
Gene Sorensen.
What's up?
Of the foot with the ankle low, my right foot. Hogan had a shoe with an extra spike to push off the ground while moving his hips forward. You recommend moving into ankle high. Could you demonstrate moving the ankle high while keeping the hips centered?
Yep. So, look, at the end of the day, I mean, there are numerous ways to play really high-level golf. And can you play high-level golf with banking? Yes, absolutely you can. Just understand what that does. And again, this is another shout out to Luke Brackey, who's one of my mentors on movement. And one of his quotes to me that just like, it's one of those things that just gets stuck in your mind. You're like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it like opens up a whole new doorway for you. Is if you actively move a joint group, right? So my elbow, if I go into elbow flexion here, so I'm like trying to show off big guns, right? What I am also going to do is affect neighboring joint groups. So I'm affecting the shoulder here, I'm affecting the wrist, and that will happen throughout the entire body, including the ankles. So if my idea is to bank, so banking, just so that we're like really clear with what banking is, banking simply means that I am pronating the foot. Okay, so supination of the foot would look like this, and I'll try to do this without like really moving the knee, so the patella should not, like I'm not throwing internal and external to make the foot move. The femur will stay here. If I supinate, I'll look like this, and see how I put pressure on the outside edge. If I pronate, I'm taking the arch of my foot and I'm shoving it down into the ground this way. Okay, so this is banking. In essence, banking is pronating the foot. Well, again, if I pronate the ankle, and that's my active thought, that's also going to affect where the knee moves in space. See how the knee now starts to cave? And that's also going to affect up in here in the hip complex. This caves, so if this knee moves this way, that's adduction of the femur. Okay, so adduction of the femur simply means that this femur is going in here relative to the pelvis. So if I'm moving the femur this direction, what's that do to the pelvis? Where it laterally sways the pelvis. And this is also a very common way, like when somebody goes, hey, get your weight forward or get your weight left. Most of the time what we see people just intuitively do is they'll shove their pelvis forward towards the target. And now if I were on a pressure mat, the pressure reading in my lead foot, my left foot for a right-handed player, would spike compared to my trail foot. Now, what does that do to my chest? See what my chest is doing and see what my head's doing? It's almost falling backwards here, okay? And look at where my trunk is. Now, you'll still see players do this on tour. I mean, Scotty Scheffler is a perfect example of this. He does a ton of it. Can you play high-level golf with that type of a pattern? Clearly, yeah, you can. Now, again, and we'll just continue to reiterate this. From our lens, what I'm fortunate enough to do, and what Jackson's fortunate enough to do, and all of us here at Elite, is we work with some freaking golf dorks, like big-time golf nerds. Man, they study a ton, right? They're going to go rep a ton. They've got out back, they've got freaking nets and hitting bays, and they rep a ton. So I'm more a fan of preventative medicine, meaning if you move well, you're going to move the needle in your favor for injury prevention, preventative. Now, what this does, this type of a move here, it makes this trail leg go valgus. Like, see how it's right in here? Like, this is injury riddled. And the reason that it's injury riddled is if I shove this trail foot to the ground, this inside ankle bone goes low, adduction, pelvis starts to sway forward. Inevitably, what I'll end up doing is I'll start to rotate, but my pelvis will rotate. That's early extension. And why early extension has a bad rap is, in my view, early extension has a bad rap because it causes injury. That's number one, from my view. What it also does is it makes it more difficult to control the golf club in a lot of ways through the hit. If I'm pushing this pelvis forward, rotating it, my trunk now has to rotate in opposition of that and tilt to slot the club. So again, if I'm right here and I go bank, there goes the pelvis. See where the club just naturally wants to go? It wants to go out. So I have to turn this away from the target and tilt it to slot the golf club. So this stalls. All that tilt puts undue pressure onto the L spine, which that's the majority of injury in our game, is lower back injury, and we'll have elbow injury, right? Tennis elbow, golfer's elbow, whatever. So if I go shove and I'm in here, tilt this back, the way that I close the face down is I'm just going to rotate the arms to go ahead and close it down. And so I'm going from heavy external rotation here to immediate blam, it starts to go internal. And what you're doing is, you're just putting undue pressure onto single joint groups there. L spine and instep anterior arm line of your trail arm. So we see this injury and we see this injury all the time. So again, getting back to your question now of like, okay, well, these inside ankle bones stay high. So as I stay dropped, inside ankle bone goes in here. Why I love teaching players this, and most of the time, like if I see somebody that understands that, hey, Riley wants me to drop, wants me to swivel the pelvis so the pelvis doesn't go lateral, I want the rib cage to go lateral. They won't be able to do this because in their mind, subconsciously, they need to bank and all of a sudden look at what this shape looks like. See my trunk? Stall, tilt. And it's through the hip most of the time. So if I can teach players to either throw the heel away, get the inside ankle bone working high, like what that allows this to do, see how my pelvis no longer laterally sways through the hip? So if I drop and do either one of those, inside ankle bone high, heel away, almost looks the same, but look at what the pelvis starts to look like here, how it stays underneath me. Look at my trunk line, and look at what my rib cage can do now. So I've got all this tissue work are supportive of what I'm doing from my rib cage up and out through my arms and through the club. Hopefully that makes general sense.
Love that. All right, we got a few questions on ground forces. So this will be
Okay.
Chris was asking, and then in our live chat,
Great.
we had Kenny asking about it. How are ground forces utilized in the swing, considering the lower body's passive role, and how do we use those forces to gain more speed and power in the swing?
Okay, so there's a word in there that we absolutely need to tweak, okay? Passive is not the role of the lower body. It's supportive. Now, supportive simply means it's supporting what? So supportive, the lower half again, so my L spine, my pelvis, my femurs, my shin bones, my feet, everything from underneath my ribs, supportive. Doesn't mean that it's still, it means that it's supporting what my intention is in my ribs, my arms, my hands, and the club. Okay? Our term passive simply means that it's responsive. Okay, so like let's say that I have, like we talk often about this idea of like passive release. This is active release, like I'm supinating here to throw this club down my coronal plane. This is I'm actively sending it over here. Now as I turn, I do this all the time. See where the shaft is? I turn, now where the shaft, look at where the shaft is. That's angular force. Now, did I try to make the shaft shoot out? No, it was a passive response to me turning. That's passive in elite golf school's language, okay? Passive means responsive. Now, the reason that the lower half, or my pelvis or my legs or my feet, aren't passive is because they do have an active role. And especially in the pelvis's job is to actively drop. That actively leverages and loads the posterior spiral line. And again, the posterior spiral line just goes up through my calves, up through my hammies, up through my booty, up along my spine and my cords and attaches right at the base of my skull. So anytime that I drop, boom, I've actively loaded that spiral tissue. Okay, so the idea here is, like, when it comes to ground reaction force, which again, it's a kind of a silly force, because like we're going to have it. Like if you get on a scale, there's numbers that come up. That's ground reaction. You standing somewhere is going to produce force just because you're standing there and gravity's pushing you down, right? Or pulling you down, however you want to deem it. So what we'll see in these forces, and why we see this like spike, and you'll see it in every single good player, where it's like kind of chilled out, then it like lowers here as the player drops. Like think if you're in an elevator and in the immediate dropping act, like if you skydive, like as you're dropping to the earth, how much do you weigh? Zero. You don't weigh anything. If you had a scale like right on you, like if I was here just dropping to the earth and that scale was attached to my feet, it would read zeros. So as you're dropping, you're losing ground reaction force. You are lighter there. So on the scale, we would see this like little whoop. This looks like it goes up. In the scale, it says that it loses. You're losing weight here. And then all of a sudden we have this like big boom. Like we'll see it whoa, wow, in ground reaction force. So the reason for that is not because I drop and then push up to jump. Like in 13 years of coaching full time, I think I've coached 2 players ever where I go, jump. One is Aubrey,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
the other one is Kylie Cooper-Smith down in Arizona. Jump, jump. So it's not a common thing, very, very rarely. The reason that we see that spike is because I'll go spiral, spiral, spiral. This spiral is elevating me this way, so I'm going up, which actually means that the ground reaction is going to increase when I go up. Because for me to go up, what's my weight going to be on the scale right now? It increases when I'm going up. It decreases when I drop. So now from here, swivel in the pelvis, and this upper spiral line starts to pull me. So I'm going back up. I'm not jumping, I'm not actively going here, but look at what happens in all my like major joint groups, knees, hips, all the way up into the shoulders. Look at this. Wow. Oh, it extends. So extension, to use this word again, passive, this is passive hip extension. It's appropriate hip extension because I'm not throwing the pelvis. I'm dragging the pelvis because of the upper spiral line just pulling me up. And so the reason that we see these spikes is because once you drop, you lose weight, so you lose ground reaction force. But now as you start to spiral back up, you gain force into the ground, and so we spike. You gain weight because you're working back up. That's the look of ground reaction force. But please, unless you are so severe into this drop and stay in here where you look like this at finish, your cue should not be to jump, ever. And that would be a massive rarity. That's like, I don't know. If it's been twice for me, it's probably 1 out of 1,000 people that need jump to like get you going. There's another way to go up. Exactly.
Yeah. One guy that I coach said that needs that.
Yeah. So one guy for Jackson. How long you been coaching?
2.5, 3 years.
2.5, 3 years. So in 2.5 or 3 years, you have one bloke that you've ever said, you got to jump home.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool because it's such a rarity that you're like, oh, this guy doesn't know he needs to go back up. Yeah, exactly. But that should be through spiral tissue, ideally. Great question. Ground reaction force. All right, who's next, Holmes?
Johan Mercier? I hope I didn't butcher that. Please clarify the position of the low point. Some say it's in line with your left shoulder, arm, and leg. It's the end of the circle. However, your arm play videos, they explain the low point being where your sternum is at impact. Yep. And there is a different low point for every club. Also, the shoulders are open slightly at impact, not square. I think that was more of a, is there a different low point for every club?
Well,
finding the question in that.
There's just a low point, and like the fun thing is like a lot of the stuff that we coach, Jackson, is like they're just athletic principles, right? And athletic principles are just simply like just a general awareness, right? Like when we say trunk balance, that means the distance my trunk is away from the golf ball. When I'm looking to hit out of my transverse plane, it means that I'm dropping enough to where I'm going, oh, my chest is reasonably positioned now at an object that I want to hit, so I can shoot these arms out. Athletic principles, right? So we're not going, hey, the lead wrist needs to be at 2 degrees flexion and the shaft is at 43 degrees. Well, if you're 6'3" compared to 5'3", that's not going to work for every single person. So the principle is the point here, okay? And with low point, like a lot of these concepts, guys, like our job as coaches and educators at Elite is to move you in a dynamic manner so that when you have this instrument at the delivery position, and delivery, just to define, is my fully loaded position, so somewhere in the 5.5 P5 range, somewhere in here. So now I'm here and I could take this instrument and precisely hit the object that I want to hit with the angle of attack, the path, control where the racket is pointing. And a lot of that needs eventually to get into just a general lens where you talk like a frickin' 30 handicapper again. I mean, the amount of people that I coach where, like my eye test, I'll take a look at them and they start to like really look nice, like they're in system and they hit it fat. All I tell them is to push their low point forward. Push your divot forward. Get your divot up here instead of back here. Okay, well that's pretty simple, right? If you're looking really nice and you're towing it a heck of a lot, okay, can you hit one that's like a half a dime on the heel? Like, at the end of the day, there needs to be some amount of like athletic, like, okay, let me just take this thing and frickin' hit the object that I want. If I'm like picking it, can you take the thing and frickin' shove it in the ground a little bit more and spike your AOA? Yeah, of course, like you can do all that. Our job again is to get you into a position here, like dynamically working through here so that it makes it easier on your life to hit really consistent, great shots. And there needs to be some amount of intuitive nature to that. Okay, so that's number one. Now the concept for controlling low point is all based on the center of mass of your ribs. Okay, so pretty easy. The reason that we say the sternum is because in general, like at delivery and through the hit, the shoulder axis will be relatively pointing down the target line. Now, we like them open, but the reason that they're open is it's more of it's just 3D space. 3D. It's difficult to
we need another camera.
So yeah, right, somehow. But here's the look. If my shoulder axis is now level to the ground and I start to drop and then spiral, where is my shoulder axis now? What's perpendicular to my shoulder axis? Right there. So we deem this to be target bias. And every single high-level player will have some amount of that look. You're never going to have a high-level player whose trunk perpendicular to their chest or their shoulders is back here and they hit the golf ball. Ever. You'll never see that. If you find one, send it to me because I'd love to see that, homie, because that's a unique dude right there. But there isn't one. Okay, now from down the line, we'll still kind of see this steep. Like, I mean, they'll still be open with a lot of players. Every once in a while, you get a player that's like a little bit closed, but that player that's closed is oftentimes this kind of a player here. Shove out the pelvis, this tilts back. And so I'm in here, but still closed down here. Look at what they'll look like through the hit. Still over here. This is open, okay? Like figuring that out, all right? So the question then, what was the question here? Where did I go? I was rolling.
Is there a different low point for every club?
Low point. Thank you, Jackson. So low point is dictated by the center of mass of your ribs at the moment of the strike, in general, okay? Now, we say this, there's another way to control your low point, and that's in the pelvis. Like I could shove my pelvis way up here, okay, and my ribs can be back. But what I would now have to do is heavily lower and retract this to control the low point, and now you can see where the low point's going to be, even though my center of mass of my ribs is almost behind the golf ball. Now, for us, what we like to see is a pelvis that's dropped, right? And the rib cage can float slightly forward here. Now, right here, you can tell where my center of mass is just in front of that golf ball right there. Now, what we want in like wedges, obviously a steeper angle of attack. So if we're down 8, 9 in wedges, good. That's a good number. If you're down 12, still reasonable. Mid irons kind of down 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there is totally reasonable. Then you get into your woods and somewhere around 0, maybe 1 down is good. And then if we're up into driver, I mean, you see some guys on tour that are like up on it 4, 5, 6, even on the LPGA tour. Every once in a blue moon, you got a guy that's down on it like Tiger likes to be down 1 or 2. Okay, let's just examine this. We're talking 4 degrees. I mean,
Nothing.
if that's 0, that's 4. It's not much, right? Compared to wedge. Okay, this is our difference here. This is like 15. So it's not a ton. We're not going 90, right? But we do want the golf club from in here. It's going to descend, 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 bottom out, then ascend. Well, the reason that we deem this to be the bottom out point is because, no shit, the arms attach into your frickin' rib cage, not your pelvis. So if I shove my pelvis forward to get my weight forward, ooh, I spiked this. Where's my bottom out going to be? Just look at me right here. Where does it look like I want to encounter? Okay, if I shove this forward. If I drop this and I sway this forward, just look at where it looks like my attention or intention is to bottom out. See where it is? Like it's up in here. Like the arms attach into the ribs. So the ribs are going to affect the arms more than the pelvis is going to. That should be like kind of general, like 101, right? But in our map, in our system, that's why we want the rib cage to float forward slightly. And we'll see that happen by delivery. So I'm off of it. As I'm dropping back in, see where I'm at now? I've got this up, I'm set up. So I've got low point already. I've got everything set up. If the club had slotted appropriately, now I can take the arms and hands, send it out of the transverse plane, descend, 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 descend. Here's my sternum or my center of mass of my ribs. There's the low point. So I'd be just in front of this golf ball here. And the same thing would happen with driver, but driver's up off my lead foot. So as I do the same action, I'm forward here. Look at where the center of mass of my ribs really is though. It's right in here. It might be a little bit forward in my feet. So I spike this up to like maybe 60-40 because of this rib cage, but it's still, there's my bottom out. So yeah, what an easy athletic concept to get your mind around that this, the center of mass of this at the strike is what's going to dictate the bottom out of the club through the hip.
Good question.
Nice question.
All right, let's hop into some of these live questions. Jamie Chen. Any reason to not use the go-to setup to give yourself more space and time to organize for standard shots?
Do we know if we're talking about full swing or short game here? I think we're talking full swing.
I think so.
Can you restate the question?
Any reason to not use the go-to setup to give yourself more space and time to organize for standard shots?
Yeah, okay. So what's interesting with this, let's define this first. So go-to, again, anytime there's a go-to-centric kind of outlook, go-to is unbelievable at describing gait pattern. Okay, so like forward locomotion, whether I'm walking or running. So if I'm walking and I step with my left foot, I'm going to rotate my chest over this left foot, and then I go whoomp, boom. See, I've rotated my chest over this right foot. So what go-to setup is, and we talk heavily in this in our short game masterclass, is an understanding that, and I'll do this like severely here, so just so we can like really see this. So if I got this golf ball right here and I step with my left foot, that means that my chest is going to rotate over the top of this left foot. So look what my shoulder axis is here. Relative to the target, I'm open. My foot axis, my ankle axis, severely closed right here. So the reason that we like this is this like closed stance in the feet and open shoulder axis is now immediately I've already got the bottom out. See how I'm facing ahead of this thing. So if I set up in here and I unload the golf club as I keep motoring this chest like through, now I'm good. Okay, now you won't see that like heavy of a go-to stance unless you see like a tour player with like a very severe downhill slope. You usually won't see like that amount of like craziness, but you will see in a lot of tour players now like either very square or slightly closed here, and then look at the shoulder axis, open here slightly to the target, like a few degrees, and a few degrees down here. Again, what that does, if I open and I let my arms and hands go with me here, see where the intention is to bottom out. So if I have this golf ball right here and I'm a few degrees here, look at where now perpendicular to that shoulder axis, there's my bottom out. So if I'm set up here, I now can go ahead and unload this club as I turn. What a nice way to go ahead and hit a pitch shot. Again, supportive. I'm staying dropped in. This is the rotator. This is the unload. Okay, so a great technique for like distance wedges. I mean, you'll see bunker shots like this, and this is a great way to either hit like a flop or a bunker shot. If I'm hitting like a 60-yard shot, you might see like a little bit of this. See, I'm slightly closed, slightly open in the shoulders, and the same kind of look. So, getting back to the question.
Full swing.
Full swing.
Yep.
Goda. You will see this out of quite a few players on tour who like to cut the golf ball. And so you'll see a lot of these types of setups, like small Goda setups, Goda style setups with driver, because what's the majority, like the majority of the guys out on tour are hitting some type of like a tumble cut with driver, because it's a lower rate of rotation type of shot to hit, right? If I'm hitting cuts, that means that I'm pretty heavy in the chest, right in here. Now with driver again, where's the ball position? Ball position is further up. It's in front of my sternum. So one, I've got more time here for the golf club, like it's going from here, okay? And I'm trying to go perfectly perpendicular with my shoulder axis to the camera right now. So if I've got this thing swinging, it's coming from the inside, from the inside, from the inside, from the inside, done. Now it's going left, it's going left, it's going left. This is 0 right here. So where's the ball position with driver? Up a bit, okay? Now a lot of these guys, what they'll do is they'll go here. See how I've just rotated my chest to go right here? Where's the path now? Path is left. And it's easier for me to get the face left here as well. And at the end of the day, if you're gonna hit some kind of a pull cut, which you'll see this like, there's this cool video of Tiger at TGL above him, like right in here. And so you could see his foot line and his shoulder line like so easily because you're looking straight down on him. And his shoulders are well left of his feet. Who else did this? Hogan did this a ton. Like you see that drawing of like, okay, there's wedge, and then he just brings this back like on kind of almost like a 45-degree angle. And so this was driver for Hogan. Look how open he is here compared to the feet. Well, makes it easier to go ahead and turn and burn through here. This is a slight look at Goda setup with driver. So you'll see this quite a bit, especially on tour. And if you just like, I mean, shoot, you go onto YouTube, super easy, and look from down the line and just look at like shoulder axis compared to foot line and find guys that cut the golf ball, and you'll see that as like a primary like concept that a lot of these guys are doing. Whether they know it or not, I have no idea if they know that they're doing that in their setup. But that's a small bit of Goda, and it's a great way to help you cut the golf ball and cover the golf ball a little bit better.
I think Wyndham is a little like that. Too. I mean, he's a massive cutter of the golf ball.
And he cuts the golf ball with driver.
Yep.
You bet. You bet. Everything else is straight, but nice little cutter with D-stick. Kepka, right. Same. Blah, blah, blah.
All right, Dean.
What up, Dean?
It's kind of a little back onto our first question a little bit. How does the lead humerus move through impact and into follow-through compared to the lead forearm?
Okay, great. How does this work through impact and then into the follow through.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, well, okay. All right.
Buckle
So, this is where, like, just to define, like, this is humerus, so the upper arm bone. This is the humerus bone, and then we have the ulna and radius here. Okay, so, and this goes back to like why we call like forearm action. So if I'm moving these bones, this is hand action. See how it immediately affects here, but it doesn't actually have to affect that much of the upper arm. Now, if I kept going, yeah, it's going to go ahead and spiral up and like get into the shoulder. So what the lead arm does, if you are younger, if you're lighter, if your swing speed is lower, not if you're older, okay? Not if you're older. But if you're lighter, younger, and your swing speed is lower, then having some amount of like this lead arm tumbling out of here is completely fine. What tumble means is simply that the lead arm is actively lowering. See, I'm taking this down my rib cage. And if I do that with enough speed, what it's going to do is it's going to flash this out of here like pretty heavily. So this is big time external rotation. What does that allow the face to do? It does this. If I'm doing that, I've got to create space for the golf club to be severely thrown down. So I'm going to shove the pelvis up and forward here. So primarily pelvic rotation as I'm rotating here. So see how this almost stays trapped back, and I'm not like as rotary with the chest through the hip. So I'm going to have an upward angle. Okay, I'm going to unload it potentially maybe a little bit earlier, especially relative to the golf ball based on where the rib cage is. So I'm right in here. So what does that mean? Higher launch, higher dynamic loft, a path that can come from the inside based on the rib cage staying trapped back, so I can keep the golf club slotted and then rotate it here. So what type of shot does this look like? Draw pattern, higher rate of rotation in the club face. Okay, so that's a block, mid-flight or higher trajectory, draw bias golf ball. Where do you see that? LPGA Tour. LPGA Tour. Mm-hmm. Okay, what do you see on tour for the most part? Now, Rory does a lot of this, but what do you see out of Brooks? What do you see out of DJ, Neiman, Mito, Hovland, Lucas Glover? I mean, just keep going. Tiger. You see this, they're primarily cutting it. So what does their lead arm look like? This is super freaking cool. Like, remember, like, in the 90s, this was like the thing. You gotta keep your lead arm, it's gonna be straight. Straight, right? Doesn't break down. Because we're all afraid, like, if we bend it, then I can't control the low point. That's not true at all, okay? And you'll see this out of, like, a lot of these guys. Hovland, Oshke, Lee Westwood, Lee Trevino, at 5'5". Oh, shit. I bent my left arm.
How do you control your low point?
Oh my gosh, right. Low point control is more based on, again, we want this outward look. This is our preference, again, for most. An outward shoot through the transverse plane, okay, and good trunk balance. So if I have that, like, it's super easy to frickin' know where the low point is or where the golf ball is. And also, sorry, but like, if I have an axe, I don't like miss the tree when I look like this, right? I can still take the frickin' axe edge and frickin' hit it really precisely there. Don't have to have this look at all. Now, can you? Sure, to some degree, but you need to match that up well, and you need to really know what's gonna happen to your body in order to match that up really well, okay? Some people have more risk, like, they're more risk averse, and others are going to be like, okay, you cannot move that way because of mass or age or whatever. Okay, so this happens because if I go external rotation in the dynamic hit, external rotation with this throw, so it happens to the elbow. This goes into like massive extension because of that. So we'll see this early where we're in here. Boom. See this? So we'll have this straight left arm, really it's an extended elbow at that point. Okay, well, what does that match well with? Trunk going away, pelvis going forward, here's the hit. Well, what if I'm a player who internally rotates to move the golf club back here? So now it's a coronal plane look in the delivery. I've dropped the pelvis and I start to rotate the rib cage. Look at what the humerus looks like now. And it's super easy to tell this. The opposite side of the elbow, this is the antecubital fossa. Look where it's pointing. Compared to the other player, look where the antecubital starts to point, towards the camera. This is like, it can be up to like a 90-degree difference. It's also where golfer's elbow comes from. Boom! Over and over again. You golf psychos out there, you want to do that to your tissue? You want to do that to joint groups? Be careful. Be careful. Okay? So, again, like, boom, if I'm in here, and now all of a sudden that's poorly worded. I'm turning and dropping in here while I'm moving the golf club down this coronal plane. Like, see down the line, like where this club is going? I can do that with supination. I can do it with internal rotation, this lead arm. Boom. So I'm right in here. Now, I'm going to be turning with that as well. What does turning in the chest do to the arms? Makes them shoot out. Ooh, an outward shoot. That's all angular force. Now, has that gone external? Maybe to some degree, but it's sure not to the degree of this kind of a throw. So yeah, do we have an internal state and then it starts to go more external to get back neutral? Yes, for sure. And we'll see that, like, we call this like Fleetwood finish, or for us, like front loader. Mm-hmm. So if I'm turning, boom, so see now in general, my shoulder axis is perpendicular to the camera. Well, if I'm in delivery here at 5.5, as I turn and I shoot all this energy out, see where that golf club ends up going? The arms just go back neutral at that state. Okay, so if I go here and then just fold, it's still in a neutral state there. External would make me look like this, right? So we'd see this big heavy tumble out, which we don't want much of that because you're restructuring the whole arm line that way, like both upper arms, like big throw out here. See this? Big external, right arm goes over, not even close to where I started. So that's the preference for almost everybody, just because, like, again, you still can hit block draws with good body movement here. You just have to learn how deep the club needs to get at delivery so that now as you're turning through here, that's where all the energy can go, is more from this inside path. So I'd prefer, like, darn near everybody to have some amount of those types of concepts going on in their golf swing, just because it's healthy, it's easy to control the low point, and you always maintain the structure of your arms, hands, and club throughout the entirety of your swing relative to your rib cage. How do you hit crooked shots that way? This is how you hit crooked shots, not this. This is freaking boom, got it. Look at that. No. Yes. Humorous.
Lovely. Humorous. Alrighty, Bill.
What up,
you're
Bill?
gonna like I know the answer to this one already. What do you think about raising the lead heel in the backswing and then putting it down on the downswing? Furthermore, what if the lead heel moves toward the target as I put it down?
Bill. I mean, you just answered your own question.
Yep.
Do that. Next. No. So, Bill, yes, absolutely. Like, that is 100% our preference in movement. Like, even if I'm standing here, okay, and I like walk in space, like, ideally what we have is this kind of a look. See where my heels go? Wah, wah, wah. Just watch Rory. Like, there's a bazillion videos of Rory hitting driver from face on or from his booty view. And just take a look at his lead heel. Like, this is Rory McIlroy, one of the best golf swings, like, ever. Does his lead foot look as severe as Nicklaus's did, where we have this, like, huge, right? No. But Rory moves so well, like, as he's turning huge up through the spiral tissue, like, big. See how it pulls that heel up off the ground? Now, what Rory's beautiful at is as he continues to rotate this away, he'll start to drop. So see where that lead heel starts to plant. Starts to plant closer to the target in here. And now, once it plants, like, Bill, this would be great if you're doing this already, like, off, boom, there's the plant. Now you can start to swivel the pelvis and start to motor that spiral line through. So we just look, spiral tissue, as you keep motoring spiral tissue, drop, there's the lead heel plant, swivel, upper spiral to finish. That's the whole darn golf swing. Great question. Great statement, actually.
Zane,
Zane.
This one should be fairly simple. Do we go into flexion with the pelvis when we drop?
Yes. So hip flexion, pelvic drop, boom. So this angle right here, okay, from femur to trunk line, that angle becomes more acute as you drop, okay? Now, it's not a hip hinge, because what am I violating if I hip hinge? The space in here. This is sacred space. When I start here, my trunk or my ribs can't get closer. So it's not hip hinge. See, now I'm in trouble, okay, because I can't shoot the energy out. I got to pull it back into me. If I drop, so this angle decreases, but I maintain this space away. That's proper. So you'll see more flexion state here, as well as the knees, but the knees don't pitch forward towards the golf ball. So no, yes. Great question. That can happen anytime in transition, by the way.
All right, we'll hop into an older one. Jay Schwartz, which I think you kind of answered this a little bit with forearms.
Right.
When I was learning golf, there was lots of talk about the Malaska move of tumbling the club out to offset the momentum of the club going behind you. This is very different from what is taught today. Was Mike's concept just BS? Or is there a matchup that gives this idea some validity?
So, dude, this is so good. This is a great question,
Yes.
actually, and I appreciate the like. Was it BS? So we were talking about this because like a lot of the information out there is it can come across as like very much like quick fixy, okay? And we were discussing this the other day. There was a coach, like high level coach on Instagram the other day that was talking about like, hey, how to create is that the club would do this into backswing, and then from here we're going to pull the handle down, and now all of a sudden I create this lag. Now, is that bad? Yeah. Is it good? Yeah. The reason that it can be both is because what you have to be able to do as a player is you've got to diagnose, is that action going to help me? Now, if I'm a player who like really severely like loads it, like overloads it early, and then I throw it out, will that match up? Will that outlook help me? Hell yeah. But what if I'm a player that gets up here and I want to pull this handle down, and now I do more of that? That'll hurt a player. So anything out there can absolutely be great for a certain player. Okay, especially when it comes to these like quick fixes. Now, what I'm like desperate to do from my end, and this is why I speak to anatomical so much, is I want this to be precise. And oftentimes if we say wrist extension, I mean, how do you overdo wrist extension? I mean, I'm not saying range of movement, okay? I'm just saying this is wrist extension, period. This is not. So this is radial, this is wrist extension. Both can leverage a club. Leverage, leverage. Load it, because I can unload it. Load it, because I can unload it. So hinge the club in what way? That's why I speak anatomical all the time. I get shit for it all the time because it's like, I don't understand it. Get on a dadgum Google machine and frickin' figure it out. Wrist extension, you'll see this. And now you know what it is. Okay, and I try really hard as well to like describe and explain what the definition is if I throw out some term that I know that not every population, everybody in the population is going to understand. So getting to the point, Malaska is talking about, Nicholas used to say this, he used to call it planing the shaft. So planing the shaft in Nicholas's definition was this way. Okay, now what does this do? Well, number one, it's a way to start to close down the club face, okay? It's also a way to lower the club. So can I hit a good shot like this? You bet. If I just kept it going, boom. Generally speaking, I can hit a good golf shot that way. What do I need to do though? I need to generally keep the chest away. So even right there, bottom out control is really difficult. So the bottom out's too far forward. So what we end up doing, I'm going to shove that pelvis forward. And when I do that, look at what happens to the movement. Problems. So I've got this tissue going away, this tissue going forward, this tissue going away. You shredding tissue, man, every single rep. Okay? So what's also interesting with Malaska is he's, as I have, you modify your teaching. He's modified his teaching a lot from that. I mean, shoot, the gentleman that I learned a ton from as a junior, We do a lot of things that maybe are in direct opposition of that now. Is that a hate towards him? God, no. I learned so much from him. He helped me play really high level golf, and you know, helped me with like further my education because of some silly game. Like I owe him a ton, and he educated me a ton. He's a doctor as well, like knows a lot of stuff. I learned a ton. Okay, now what's fun is like even here, we've got a couple of kids, one kid in particular, John McMullen, who likes to overlay the club. So what does it feel like he does in his transition? We've been working in here. What does he also do? Because he does so much of this, loads of drop and sway forward. Okay, so he does so much of the good stuff. He's got such a freaking dope action. But what we've tried to have John do is, one, don't lay the club as much. The arms can kind of feel like they fall down and the golf club slots a little bit more. Also, John, you don't have to go as far forward. You don't have to drop as much. So what does John feel in transition? John feels like he goes right here. And what does he actually do? The right amount of the good stuff. Other players, what do? They'll drop here early and then early extend and throw this. So what are we having them do? Get up here, frickin' throw that thing back. They're tall at the start and then they learn to drop in transition so they look more in here. And they'll feel like they're running the golf club right into their ankle. Woof. That's what they sense. That's their like general athletic principle that gets them neutral and gets them right. So long story short here, man, Alaska's not full of BS. Like, no. Is that move bad? Yeah. And no. It just depends on the player that you are and what you need to do to match your system up well in a healthy manner. That's the key.
Love that. All right, this is an interesting one. John O'Neill. How does
John O'Neill, that's a good strong name.
Strong.
John O'Neill.
Strong like bull. I haven't talked about this in a while or heard anybody talk about it. How does the head and eye position affect the golf swing? I tilt my chin up and back away from the ball to make room for shoulder rotation.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does to some degree. I mean, you even like, I can't remember the exact terminology of it, but like hawks, right? They've got eyes that are freaking straight here, right? Mm-hmm. So it helps with like depth perception when you got both.
Foveal vision?
Foveal vision is some other one, I can't remember. Yeah, this is foveal, right? So I'm looking straight at you, so I have depth awareness, like all of it, okay? Does it help? Sure, it's a sense. Just like touch is a sense. Sight is a sense. Like, so if I've got both eyes at it, that's helpful. Okay, and if I can keep both eyes generally at it throughout the course of the swing, it's helpful. Do you have to do it? No. Like, what's interesting, I mean, we never ever teach somebody to like slot it and then, hey, rip your eyes out of there to get turning. Like, no. Does it end up happening as a passive response? Yeah, man, it sure does. Because what are we teaching players to do? Their thoracic spine, T-spine, is rotating, boom, target side. Well, what's real close to the T-spine? Your C-spine? What does your C-spine really do? It moves your frickin' dome piece around, right? So if I'm rotating this way, wouldn't it make sense that this is going with it to some degree? So we'll have players like, boom, looking in here, and some players like Keaton Vallette's one of my favorite golf swings that I'm able to coach, Canadian homie, and I'm sure you've probably all seen him on Instagram. I put him up all the time because it's such a good act. But from like P5 or P6, his eyes start to leave and he looks like this at the strike. Well, so did Duval, so did Annika. I think they had fairly good careers. DJ does it at lower speeds. Mm-hmm. Like, it's something that does happen for a lot of like turn and burn type of athletes. Like, great. And it's kind of cool because it's a quirk. Mm-hmm. And what do we love? We freaking love quirks. Like, that's part of the joy of coaching is like every single player that I go, let me watch you, and they make a move, there's something in there that I'm like, oh man, that's kind of cool. That's neat and unique, right? And we want to keep those kinds of items because it's like, oh, okay, that makes that player. Like Duval was kind of known for that, right? Oh, his eyes would leave. Same thing with Annika. And we're all like, ooh, that's kind of cool. So going back to this, like, Vision, yeah, it's important. One of the things that I'd really like you to do as well, like when it comes to your skull, okay, like, and we'll just talk to the spine and then talk about what that's going to do to my dome. Okay, so at the address position, what I'd like most people's to do, it's close.
English.
Most people to do is I want their eyes more down at the golf ball to start. Now, what is this? This is C-spine flexion. I also want T-spine flexion at the start, because flexion in the T-spine allows for my scaps to protract. That means my arms can be out in front of my chest in my anterior space. So I like this look, and you'll see a lot of this look on tour. You won't see a whole lot of this look. See how my eye line's out here? This is T-spine extension, C-spine extension, so now I'm up in here. So at the address position, we're down in here. This is more of that like flexion state in the T-spine, flexion state in the C-spine, and now from here, as I turn, and about halfway back-ish, okay? And the rule is generally when the upper spiral line of the chest starts to affect the pelvis and the pelvis starts to get drug on here, that's when I like players to really feel like they drop. Now, drop. When I drop the pelvis, what does it do to the rest of my spine? See how my entire spine starts to go into degrees of extension? So where do my eyes start to point? Start to go up, because here's C-spine extension, here's T-spine extension. That's all because of the pelvic drop. So you'll see this out of, like, again, my favorite mover out there is Hovland. Just go watch Javi, because Hovland's over it big time. Okay, big time flexion state here, even flexion state in the L spine. Like, he tucks his little booty up underneath him, so he looks like this when he starts, and then he goes, drop. Look at his spine now. See all this, like in that transitional space, somewhere between 2.5 and 5, P3 to P5, like this space is all transition. That's when you get to drop the pelvis. That's when your spine would go into extension. Where do your eyes go? Yeah, they might kind of like peak a little bit. They kind of work up. So there, now through the hit, as I'm turning, what do I want my arms to do? I want them to shoot out of my chest, okay, on this plane here. So if they're going out, that's scap protraction. What does scap protraction lead to? Flexion. Look at where my eyes go. Because they're going out, we'll see this all of a sudden again. Look at where my eyes go. C-spine flexion, T-spine flexion, scap protraction, arms are out, so we'll have this look again. Okay, and then all the way up into finish, then yeah, of course, like we go into some amount of extension. But what's cool is the spine, in general, preference is for it to start in a flexion state, moves to an extension state in transition, back to a flexion state through the hit, back to an extension state at the finish. That's good, healthy movement if done appropriately. And what does that do to your skull, right? All of a sudden, like, my eyes will definitely move up and down to some degree because of that flexion state or extension state based on the period and time that I'm at in my swing. Hopefully that makes sense.
All right, I think last one was just a clarification from our ground force talk earlier. This is Rolando. So then you don't actively need to pull your trail heel back on the backswing and push your lead foot forward on the downswing to create ground force / speed when you swing the club.
Oh, yeah. Dude, I mean, yeah, the forces are interesting. Like, if I were on an ice skating rink, right, and I had my cool blades on, if I'm turning this way, then we're actually going to have the blades move like your feet would move in opposition to that. But it's the same thing as a walking pattern. Like, if I'm walking towards the camera and I step with my lead foot, boom, I'm right here. See that this rotation just leaks down into here. Now, what I don't want players to do, because again, this is like, you get way out of like your body's tensegrity, which maybe that's our fancy word of the day. Tensegrity simply means your ability to manage tension in movement. And there's times where we want tension to like be applied, and then times where we want to be in a relaxed state for different tissue. And that's just general movement, okay? Now, what I don't want players to do is like put a disc underneath like either foot and then push. Like, I've seen this one recently a lot, where as they're turning through, this foot slides back. You are just banging up L spine. And the other thing that tissue just freaking hates, is pulses. Tissue loves waves. It loves So there's energy in that, and you can throw a ton of energy in that type of a system. I mean, think of like a tidal wave crashing. Dude, I don't want to be in the way of that, right? Now, lightning bolts, they have wave, or they have like lots of energy as well, but tissue loves bounce, love acts. And like the reason I'm not like a massive fan of that type of an outlook, like how that was stated, is just because one, it's clunky, which means that it's burst, burst, burst. And at the end of the day, it's really difficult to stand here at a ball and go, okay, through the hip, because I want to turn this way, I'm going to try to shove this foot forward at the golf ball this way. So it makes me go here. Okay, like I understand it, but like, wouldn't it be nice to just like, maybe I have like a cable row in a gym and I can step and turn, and that'll teach me like, oh, the pelvis ended up going internal, right? Like the femur this is all internal rotation right in here. Okay, because of this rotation. Well, can I make that same feel as I like drop and then go in here? Sure, absolutely. But it's tough to set up over the top of a golf ball and go, all right, I'm going to push that way and turn this way to make the ball go that way. They're all lines. We need shapes, right? Like the club going down this plane, that's weird. But if I'm going turn with it, look at this shape all of a sudden that I can see in my mind. Like the club's going here relative to me, and where am I going? Oh, there's where I need to go. Oftentimes, like just stay away from those types of acts, just because it's like, man, they're just bursts of energy. You lock down, and you don't have nearly as much range of motion in those types of acts as well. Injury riddled if you're comboing those things. So I get it if you want to just kind of like play around with it, just to sense a couple things in like force directions, but just be careful with doing a ton of it. Injury, injury, injury.
I think where the crux of that question comes to is like, your heels will respond appropriately based on how you're spiraling.
Yeah, dude,
Yeah.
exactly.
There doesn't need to be like you were saying, massive Nicholas or Trevino heel move towards the target. You can drill it, but
yeah.
Yep,
exactly, right? So like you can, and again, like I'll leave it with this, like I'm gonna just keep plugging these guys because I just believe in them so much. I would really encourage folks to I think they're called, it's through GOTA recodes. Mm-hmm. You're recoding how your body moves. And what's awesome is, I need to do a heck of a lot more of these. It's like, if you're walking and you're like, oh shoot, freaking bad movement pattern, like you can like grab anything and like wherever you are, grab a freaking corner on a wall and just do drop-ins where you're like, okay, this is the drop-in right in here. So as I'm going up, I'm spiraling up, drop back in, boom. So you just get used to like, okay, that's how I walk and get out of there. So what it's teaching you is to get more in tune with your entire spiral tissue. And again, we talk a lot about this spiral tissue in here, okay? Spiral tissue leaks down those IT bands into the heels. So if I'm going in here, like see what the heels start to do, they get thrown away. And it's also in your posterior line. Like this is all spiral tissue. The more that you're able to just like lock in to the entire spiral line and be aware of it and movement, dude, you are distributing all of your freaking energy throughout a 25-foot spiral line or fascial line. How are you going to get injured? Like now all the joints are taking the brunt of that, like individually, rather than individual joint groups getting busted up. You do that, it takes care of all the forces that you want. Ground reaction force, this way, that way, like all that stuff just gets taken care of. And all you have to do, you fit that son of a gun and its movement, its geometry into that, and you've got a freaking golf swing. You got a golf swing.
Easy.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for asking all the great questions. Keep them coming. I will continue to answer them as best I possibly can. Thanks so much. And go hit some frickin' slushies for me. Talk to you soon.
Peace.